All right. So that's circles. Pythagorean theorem. Page 11. Of course, I don't have the pages on here. And here we go. All right. Chapter 12, quadratics. Guys, let's put the phones away. Come on. This is your grade. Let's take some pride in getting a good grade, okay? And doing the best that you can. All right, so, do I not even have the, or is it at the bottom of this page? Yeah, of course, it's at the bottom of the page. Negative 4x squared minus 5x plus 9 equals 0. It says, use the quadratic equation to answer the following questions. Be sure to show all work. So mine was at the bottom of that page. So what's my a value here? Anyone? What was that? Negative 4, right. You do need to look at the value, the positive or the negative before it. What's my b value? What? Keep what?
Are we doing keep, change?
No.
Okay.
What is my value for b? Negative 5. Yes, make sure you get the negative in there. And yes, it does make a big difference. And finally, what is my c value? 9. Good. Okay. Then it says find the discriminant. The discriminant. Okay. In case you have forgotten, the discriminant is the part underneath the radical sign when we have the quadratic formula. So it is b squared minus 4 times a times c. B squared minus 4 times a times c. All right? So now we substitute those values of a, b, c into that expression and figure out what that number is. So b is negative 5. So I put negative 5 squared. And if you do it on the calculator, make sure you put it in parentheses. If you don't, you're going to get the wrong answer. Right, Bjorn? Yeah. Okay. Minus 4 times my a value is negative 4. And my c value is 9. We're on page 11. Excuse me, goodness. All right, so negative 5 squared is 25 minus 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. And negative 16 times 9 is negative 144. Negative 16 times 9 is negative 144. So I have 25 minus a negative. We can't have a double negative when it comes to math, so I changed this to adding the opposite. 25 plus 144 is equal to 169. That is your discriminant. Okay? Now, if you remember, when you look at the discriminant, if it is positive, that means you have a certain number of real roots. If it was equal to 0, that meant you had a certain number of real roots. And if it was negative. So this is positive. Does anybody remember how many roots? 2. Very good. Anytime that is positive, you're going to have 2 real roots. Okay? Any questions about that first problem? I saw some people giving it the side eye. Yes? How did I get 144? 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. And then negative 16 times that 9 is negative 144. And you add the opposite. I'm glad you asked. All right, so number 2, when we solve this, what number does the equation have to be equal to? 0. Yes, and that is only when you're solving. And what is the first step to factoring? What's always the first step to factoring? Find the GCF. If you have one. Find the GCF, the greatest common factor. Okay, so let's look at number 3. It says, use the graph of the quadratic at the right. If you remember, a quadratic is anything that has your variable to the second power. Okay? And because it is crossing the x-axis in 2 places, it's going to have 2 answers. Sometimes it's only going to cross in 1 place, and sometimes it won't cross at all. But use the graph of the quadratic at the right. Assume a is equal to 1. A is the coefficient out front. And if it's positive, it's going to be concave up. It's going to open upward. If a is negative, it's going to open downward. Okay? So what is my a value? Is it positive 1 or negative 1? Positive. They just told us, yes. It is a positive 1, and as you look at it, it is opening upward. Okay? What are my roots? My roots, my zeros. What else did they call them? There's like another term. Of course, I can't think of it. What are my roots here?
-3 and 2.
Yes, the roots are where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, so this is -3 and +2. -3 and +2. All right, then it says we need to rewrite this in factored form. Here is our equation for factored form. They asked for the a, they asked for root 1 and root 2. All right, so here we go. Y equals, we start with y. My a value, we said, was +1 times x, which we just leave as x when you're talking about an equation, minus, what's my first root again? -3. So you substitute that root in there. And then we go back over here, parenthesis, x minus, what's my second root? 2, and parenthesis. Now, this is pretty good. There's only one thing I need to change. We don't subtract a negative, so I need to change that to adding the positive. Okay? So this is the place where we talked about, if you remember, opposite. It looks like it's a -3, but when you put it in the factored form, it becomes the +3. It looks like a +2, but when you put it here in the factored form, it becomes or looks like a -2. So that's that opposite. Any questions on that section? All right, you guys are doing great. Let's go to number 4. It says, use the quadratic equation to answer the following questions. Be sure to show all work to receive credit. All right, so quadratic equation. And be sure to show our work to receive credit to answer. Okay, so first of all, I have 7x squared minus 3x minus 5 equals -8. Kevin, are you with us? Kevin, you with us? Okay. All right. What do I have to do with that? Yeah. Yeah, give me a second. Can you answer my question? What do I need to do with that equation? What do I need to do with that equation before I start solving for A, B, and C? Sort them out. What do you mean by sort them out?
So like, X's with each other. Alright, so you have to break it down to the simplest factor.
Not quite. What do I have to set this equal to?
Oh, 0.
Yeah, I need to set it equal to 0. Right now it's equal to -8. So I need to add 8 to both sides. Thus 8s are going to cancel out. And that gives me 0 on that side. -5 plus 8 is +3. And then I have 7x squared minus 3x plus 3. So what's my A value? 7. My B value, -3. And my C value is +3. Okay? All right. So we've now got it set equal to 0. That's when you can make sure you look for your A, B, and C. The discriminant, if you recall, is b squared minus 4ac. While I'm writing this past, I want you guys to go ahead and figure that out. See if you can do that on your own. B squared minus 4ac. You want to do math first?
I don't know what
Everybody should be trying to figure out what is that discriminant. All right. Did you come up with an answer? Does anybody want to offer up their answer? What'd you get? Say it again. -93. Anybody else get an answer, or does it match that? You got that? Anybody else? Well, let's take a look. B is -3, so I'm going to say -3 squared, and again, you have to put it in parentheses on the calculator, minus 4 times my A value is 7 times my C value is 3. -3 squared is 9 minus 4 times 7 is 28, and 28 times 3 is 84. Is that right? 84. So I get 9 minus 84, which is going to be, actually, I get -75. -75. Anybody else get -75? Okay. Bjorn, did you see what you did incorrectly? Should be -75. It's still a negative number though, and because it's a negative number, how many real roots are we going to have?
Oh, I got +9.
It should be +9. 9?
I mean, I wrote -9.
Oh, okay. How many positive, or how many roots am I going to have? 0 real roots. You will have roots, but they're not going to be real. They're going to be imaginary. Okay? Any questions on that number 4? What's underneath what? It says 28 times 3. Because 4 times 7 is 28. And then 28 times that last factor of 3 gives me 84. Okay? All right. Hey, I'm glad you're asking. All right, let's go to number 5. It says completely factor and solve. Factor and solve. So we have to solve for x. All right. There are 3 terms here. When I'm looking to factor, what should I always do first? Juanita, what should I always do first? Yes, we need to look for a greatest common factor. Do I have a greatest common factor for all 3 of these terms? I do not. The only thing that factors into all of them is 1. So since there are 3 terms, I'm going to look for X box first. And I'm going to say A times C at the top, B at the bottom. We already have it set equal to 0, so A is equal to 4. B is equal to -8, and C is equal to -5. Okay? So 4 times -5 is -20, and B is -8. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to give -20, add to give -8. Well, I could do 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Looks like 2 and 10 might be good. One of them's going to be negative. Which one? No, it's going to be the bigger one because I need it to match that sign. So -10 here, +2 here. Put in the box. First term goes in the first part of the box, so that's 4x squared. Last term with its sign, -5, goes in the last box. And the 2 in the middle go in the diagonal, and they add to give me the -8x. So I need to add an x here. -10x plus 2x gives me that -8x for the middle term. All right, so factoring 4x squared and 2x, look at your numbers. 4 and 2, what's the greatest common factor there? 2. And x squared and x is going to be x. -10x, -5, what's the greatest common factor there? -5, because you got a negative here, right? So that is -5. Now look at your columns, 4x squared, -10x. Look at 4 and -10. What's the greatest common factor there? 2. X squared and x is going to be an x. And then you have 2x and -5. Look at your numbers, and that's going to be a 1. That's always kind of the hardest one because it's like, there's nothing really there. These are your factors. So we write down 2x minus 5 times 2x plus 1. And what is this equal to again? 0. Now, you need to remember we are solving for x. So if this factor times this factor equals 0, that means one of them, at least one of them, maybe both of them equal 0. So we set each one individually equal to 0 and solve for x. So over here on the left, 2x minus 5 equals 0. Add 5. Add 5 to both sides. 2x is equal to 5. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X is equal to 5 halves, or 2.5. On the other side, 2x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1, subtract 1. 2x is equal to -1. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X is equal to -1/2. And you're like, Miss Sadie, should we have 2 answers? Yes, we should, because it's a quadratic. You will have 2 answers. Okay? You will have two answers. Any questions on A? All right, I'm gonna skip B for now, just so we can try to hit every type. Let's go to C. Okay, before I go into C, take a look at B. What would I need to do here for letter B?
Subtract.
Right, I need to move this 9 mathematically over here, so I would subtract 9, subtract 9. 9's cancel out, and your new equation would be 2x squared minus 7x minus 9, you can't combine those, equals 0. Then you look for A, B, and C, you do your X box, and away you go. Okay? All right, now let's jump to C. All right, take a look at C. How many terms do you see? How many terms do you see there? 2. What do you notice about these terms, if anything? $16. What about 16? Is that a perfect square? Is x squared a perfect square? Is 49 a perfect square? Yeah, so this is that difference of 2 squares. Okay? So we're going to take the square root, take the square root. What is the square root of 16? 4. What's the square root of x squared? Jason, come on. Kevin, put that away. What's the square root of x squared? X. What is the square root of 49? 7. So if you remember, we take those square roots and we say the first value minus 7, and then the first value plus 7 equals 0. So we just eliminated the whole Xbox thing. If you can remember the difference of 2 squares, this is, remember, is your a squared minus b squared equals a minus b times a plus b. Okay? So we aren't done yet, though. We need to set this equal to 0. 4x minus 7 equals 0, and 4x plus 7 equals 0. Add 7 to both sides for the first one. 4x equals 7. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. X is equal to 7/4. Now, I know I'm going a little fast, but we have had this before, and you can look back at today's video, slow it down, look at it as much as you want, okay? Over here, 4x plus 7 equals 0. I need to solve for x. Subtract 7, subtract 7. 4x equals negative 7. Divide by 4, divide by 4. X is equal to negative 7/4. So those are your two answers for letter C. Any questions on A or C? Looking at D, it's already set equal to 0. You can find your A, B, and C and use Xbox. Okay? All right, let's go to number 6. Number 6. This one we're going to use the quadratic equation. And we will be giving you these formulas. It says solve. When it says solve, you are looking for what is x equal to. Write your answer in decimal form. Round answers to the nearest hundredth. Letter A gives you a hint. In order to solve, the equation must be equal to what again? 0. So looking at this, it's not equal to 0. I need to move that negative 6 to the left. How would I do that? Jeremiah, come on. Jeremiah. How would I move negative 6 over to the other side? Add. Add 6. Add 6 here. 6's cancel out. I get 4x squared minus 2x, and a negative 7 plus 6 is minus 1. So now my A is 4, my B is negative 2, and my C is negative 1. Jason, come on, write some of this down. Find the discriminant. Remember, that's the part underneath the radical sign. B squared minus 4AC. So B is negative 2 squared minus 4 times A is 4 also, times C is negative 1. Negative 2 squared is 4 minus 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times negative 1 is a negative 16. So I am going to add the opposite. 4 plus 16 is 20. That is a positive value. So how many answers should I have? And how many real roots should I have? Since that is a positive value, I should have 2 real roots. It doesn't ask me that, but it's good to be reminded of that. Okay? 2 real roots. All right, this says solve using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now, we are in luck because we already found the discriminant right here. So we're going to be able to substitute that in here very nicely. All right, so my b is negative 2. I need the negative of negative 2, or the opposite of negative 2, which is going to be a positive 2. I don't like that. Let's go. Positive 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, but we already solved for that. That's 20, right? That's what goes right over here. So don't recalculate it because you already found the discriminant. All divided by 2 times a, and a is 4. So my final answer in radical form is 2 plus the square root of 20 divided by 8 and 2 minus the square root of 20 divided by 8. So on your calculators, you take 2 plus the square root of 20, hit enter right here, and then divide by 8. 2 plus the square root of 20, hit enter, and divide by 8. And you should get, good morning. You should get decimal point 809. They asked us to round to the nearest hundredths place. Which place or which digit is in the hundredths place?
The second one.
Right, the 0. So look next door, 5 or more, you need to increase the underlined number. So the correct answer here is 0.81, and that's just for the positive one where we added. The negative value, you say 2 minus the square root of 20, hit enter, and then divide by 8. and you should get negative 0.309. That's a 0. 0.309. And the hundredths place would be the 0 again. Look to the right. Look next door, 5 or more. That is going to go up. So this is negative 0.31. We're on page 12. And I am recording this so you can catch it later. Whew. So that's the quadratic formula. But once you find the discriminant, you can just plug that in and you don't have to recalculate. Any questions on that last problem? All right, let's go to 7. It looks like mine's on 2 pages. Yours is, I think, on the last page. So for number 7, fill in the blanks with information about the discriminant. If my discriminant is a positive number, how many real solutions am I going to have? How many real roots? How many real zeros? No. You either have 2, 1, or 0. 2. Yeah. If it's positive, you're going to have 2 because it's a quadratic. It's raised to the second power. If my discriminant is equal to 0, how many real numbers? 1. And if it's negative, you're going to have 0 or no real roots. Remember, we're only talking about the real roots. Okay? All right. Now, what would these look like? Well, I'm going to do mine right here because yours I know are right there and I can see what I'm doing. So if I have 2 real roots or 2 real solutions, what is that going to look like? They're all going to be parabolas. How many times will it cross the x-axis? Twice. So you could have something like this, and your roots would be here, or you could make it a U shape, as long as it crosses the x-axis twice. So this is 2 real roots, 2 real solutions. Okay? If I have a discriminant of 0, I have 1 real root. What's that going to look like? Okay, yeah, it's only going to hit or intersect with the x-axis in one place. Now, it could be moved all the way to the right. It could be moved all the way to the left. It could even be upside down. But it's only going to hit in one spot for 1 real root. And the last one, no real roots. What does that look like? Well, it's not going to cross the x-axis at all. But it's still going to look like a parabola. But it's not going to cross the x-axis. Yes? Yes, it can be on the y-axis. It can cross the y-axis, just not the x-axis. Okay? Any questions on that part of 7? All right, let's go do an example of one of these. It says, solve the following equations using the square root property. So this, we will either tell you to use the square root property, or you may see that it is a square root, 1 on each side, and you may decide to use the square root property. But we are trying to solve. This is still a quadratic, okay? So the square root property, I need to be taking the square root. I am going to leave it as it is, okay? Let me repeat that. If you are using the square root property, you don't necessarily set it equal to 0 because you have squares on both sides. So I take the square root here, and I take my square root here. Sometimes I put the 2 there, sometimes I don't. You don't need to. But I like it because if you're taking the square root of something that is squared, those cancel out. And what you're left with is x minus 3 on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, now this is a little different, and I think it can be confusing, but there are 2 different answers to the square root of 64. What's one answer? What's the one you're most familiar with? What's the square root of 64? No? Close. No? How about in between? 8. There we go. So this could be a positive 8, or it could be the negative 8. So we set x minus 3 equal to both. X minus 3 equals positive 8. X minus 3 equals negative 8. Solve for x. Add 3, get x is equal to 11. That is one of your roots, your zeros, your solutions. Add 3, x is equal to negative 5. That's how you do it. And letter B is very similar. You would do it in a very similar way. Hey, we made it through 12. Did you remember some of it? Are you glad we went over it though? No? Yes, kind of. Somewhere in the middle. All right. So, let's see. For tomorrow, what do I think would be a good section to go over? 6 is always good because that is area and volume. Where's the circle stuff? I would say if you haven't done much of the circle stuff, module 5, I think we've done some. So that is page 3, page 4, page 5, and the top of 6. Okay, so I would like you to focus on circles. That is module 5, page 3, 4, 5, and part of 6. Okay. All right, keep working hard, you guys. I do not have this totally completed, but I will get this uploaded, and I do have, and we'll get the video uploaded, okay?